Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Why Psychological Safety Matters. It's a big topic. Really appreciate everybody joining. We'll give everybody a few minutes to start filing in here and take care of some housekeeping, but just to introduce myself, my name is Mike Kinsey. I'm our Vice President of Talent Optimization here at Titus, and I'm going to be your MC for the next 30 to 45 minutes, however long you can stay with us here today. But really want this to be an interactive webinar. If you've never been to a Titus webinar before, we encourage you to interrupt us. Imagine that. We want you to ask questions. We want you to, whatever pops in your head, bring it up to us, because we want to try to answer these questions along the way as best as possible. At the end of the content that we've prepared for you today, we want to make sure that we do answer all of your questions. If we're unable to get to it in the allotted time, we're going to make sure that we follow up with you individually and get your questions answered. And at worst, this is recorded, so you can always watch it later and you can share it with others, especially if you love the content that we're going to cover today. So another thing I want to make sure that we introduce here today is our learning and development team. They're just phenomenal. They identify gaps among employees and teams, and they develop a lot of different training sessions and solutions that bridge all those common gaps that you're potentially falling into. And so towards the end of the webinar, we're going to make sure that we put up a QR code and you can scan it. You can check out all of our current learning and development offerings, which are at this point very plentiful. So hopefully we can help, and hopefully we can best serve you as our partners or future partners. So let's get into the good stuff. Let's introduce our speakers, our esteemed panel. Today we've got Cherie Kodafides, who's a senior manager of our talent optimization team at Titus, as well as Emma Bronson, who's a manager of people and learning at Titus as well. So these are the team of experts. They're going to deliver a ton of value for you today. So why should we hold off? Let's get into it. Again, topic of today, psychological safety and why does it matter? And so before we get into why it matters, Cherie, why don't you set the stage here? What is psychological safety?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Mike. So psychological safety, it is a buzzword. It has come and gone throughout the decades. So it is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. Amy Edmondson from Harvard. So this is definitely very interesting. It comes close to home. I'll describe a little bit about what it looks like and then what it's not and why it matters. So imagine just for a moment that you're on a team where you're brainstorming maybe how to sell a new product or a software. You're very excited. How are we going to roll this out to clients and our customers? Imagine you're on that team and everyone's given time to speak. Maybe teammates are open to share what they like, what may need to be improved upon, and everyone is respected in the conversation. They're open to raise their hand. Maybe, hey, I have a wild idea. Not sure if it's feasible or not, but I'm gonna really put my neck out there and raise my hand. Imagine being on that team where out of the box thinking is actually encouraged. And the team can kind of make that decision if it's a viable option. Everyone's respected and no one gets punished for that original thinking. That would be a great world, right? Now imagine a team where you're brainstorming how to sell the same product or software, except that just a few are invited to that conversation, or maybe just a couple of folks are able to decide. Speaking up with ideas is not only discouraged, you might actually be picked on or shut out of that conversation for raising your hand. Even going one step further, and I've actually experienced this in a past life, imagine that any questions, right, that curiosity, that excitement, you want to raise your hand and be part of that conversation, answered with, wow, how can you be asking such a stupid question? I thought we agreed on X, Y, and Z. So let's take a step back for a minute. What a difference in the two scenarios, right? With the same goal, selling the new product or software is the same, but the two environments are absolutely dichotomous. So you'll probably get those different results. And these two scenarios, by the way, the first one being an ideal team setting with psychological safety where folks don't feel that they're going to be humiliated, that open dialogue. And then the second example, that lack of psychological safety. This can happen, by the way, any organization, any team, big or small. A little bit of some history, just in a nutshell. How did this term come about and why is it resurging? So it has been around, first introduced by Shine and Bennis in the 1960s, two individuals, and then resurged in 1999 by Amy Edmondson. So just as a recap, psychological safety, again, can describe people's perceptions of those consequences of taking interpersonal risk in a particular context, such as a workplace. It started resurged in the 1990s because organizational research started really putting more of an emphasis on voice, teamwork, team learning, and organizational learning as a whole. And psychologists really wanted to study how people collaborate to achieve a shared outcome. Specifically, that speculations kind of on this resurgence or renaissance is because that enhanced importance of learning and innovation in today's organization. And we've seen a lot of different changes and uncertainties, specifically now with COVID, the big R word, recession. So now more than ever is very important to really focus on the changes in our business climate and how we can foster a psychologically safe environment. So Emma, I'd love to hear, I know you are all things HR and people. When it comes to psychologically safe environments, who do you think may bear that responsibility?
It's a great question, Shuri, and the answer is our leaders. When talking about a leader in the room, if that leader isn't their jovial self, do employees think that something else or something else important is going on for them? They're reading into that leader's presence and applying it to themselves. So they will relate to whatever energy you bring, which is why psychological safety is something that needs to start with leaders, and then leaders need to hold others accountable to the environment that they want to create. So one of our team members actually shared a story that stuck with me around something so simple that can make or break psychological safety, which is simply how a leader walks into a room. So this individual had a very senior leader whose body language would sway the energy of the meeting the moment that they walked in. So if this senior leader came in, head down, very brisk pace, no smile, like they are setting their stuff down and they're getting started with it, nobody is really willing to speak up during that conversation. You can just feel the tension in that room versus the time that same senior leader walks into a space. They're joking, they're smiling, they're engaging with people around them before the meeting. This really has a more relaxed feeling and a space where people are more open to speaking up and sharing. And so that inconsistency that leader's presence was creating, that constant feeling of uncertainty of how people should or even could respond in those meetings, created an unsafe psychologically environment for those people. And so if we want the best for our employees, we have to create this space where psychological safety is present for them.
Yeah, my hands are actually sweating hearing that story. Emma, I can feel myself in that meeting. And so with that, Shuri, going back to you, what are some of the key markers of psychological safety in the work environment?
Yeah, my hands are sweating too. I would definitely become very cagey if it was just this back and forth. I'm like, okay, which version of this person or this individual am I getting today?
Exactly.
That would stress me out. Definitely. So I definitely want to dive into why psychological safety matters. Again, what it looks like. It matters because really the whole reason why it started getting studied was team learning and performance. How do we really pack a punch and make sure that teams are learning and performing smoothly? So I'm a big fan of studies. So William Kahn of Boston University actually did this really intriguing study of an architectural firm and camp counselors with psychological safety. And if you think of an architectural firm, obviously very buttoned up, attention to detail, structure, and then camp counselors, maybe a little bit more freewheeling outside activities. Totally different, right? But they were given tasks, and they actually found at the end of the study, so irregardless of the actual industry, just team setting and team dynamics from a bird's eye view. And they actually found that there was a positive relationship. The teams that were the most effective at completing a task, just in general, had the highest rates of engagement and psychological safety. The teams that were falling behind maybe did not even finish the task or were the least effective at completing the task, actually showed signs of lack of psychological safety. So withdrawal, lack of feedback, and engagement. So this is really important. You want to definitely set the stage for your team. The team learning and performance, it also matters for feedback. So we definitely want to make sure in a team that there is that open dialogue for feedback, that they do feel supported, they're able to grow in their roles in the workplace. Because can you imagine that lack of psychological safety would be horrible? Employees not asking questions, maybe feedback's not requested or given. That just seems like a very flat environment to me. Maybe even, this is something I didn't think of too much until recently, but maybe even minimal disagreements. Sometimes disagreements and having that feedback of, I actually think a little different, or can we pivot over here? That's helpful. And if you have psychological safety, you're more likely to have those healthy disagreements to kind of push towards the end goal. And also kind of important to note too is having that feedback, knowing that your team will give you the benefit of the doubt, right? If we're talking about psychological safety and feeling that mutual respect, that lack of harassment, bullying, then having that benefit of the doubt, that's going to push you forward. You're going to actually probably be more apt to solicit feedback, or even get ahead of it and say, I made a mistake. How do you suggest I go about it this way? Or I'm actually kind of nervous. I hate to admit this, but I don't think I understand. Can you please walk me through how to do this? So with that increased feedback, you're actually going to have potentially increased performance because you can catch it early. And then another portion is engagement or retention. So a 2-year study by Google, Project Aristotle, actually found that 5 components of high-performing teams, psychological safety was on the list, dependability, structure, clarity, meaning of work, and that impact of work. And then a PI study also found that managers who created and fostered that environment of a psychologically safe environment actually experienced more engagement and less employee turnover on their teams. It's also important because of ethics. So going back to that second scenario where your voice doesn't have an opinion, don't raise your hand, that's a stupid question. We already talked about it. That can be a culture of fear. Another example could be the Wells Fargo. Remember when they were actually patting folks on the back for creating those accounts and giving these crazy deadlines? Oh, we need to meet our numbers. And actually, if you were a whistleblower and said, I don't feel comfortable, I have some concerns, I want to raise a flag, you actually were at the risk of being fired. So how did that happen? That was huge. I know. I was impacted. I had a fake account created too. I was mad as a customer. So something like that, right? It can affect small or large organizations. And wow, how much. Imagine if it wasn't a culture of fear, if it was a psychologically safe environment where someone can say, hey, I don't feel comfortable making this fake account for my customer. That would save a lot of headache in the long term. Kind of an extreme example, but definitely a great example of how unethical behavior can be snowballed because folks are afraid. They're afraid that they're going to lose their job, and it just can get out of control. And the last piece is creativity. I love this because a psychologically safe environment kind of pulls away from groupthink. It gives everyone the opportunity to have a seat at the table. And with the new ideas, the what ifs, you can actually have folks contribute, speak up on these organizational improvements. So if I'm thinking, wow, you have the opportunity to brainstorm and really get some ideas out there, that could even lead to new products and services, which could lead to market share, increased market share, and then money. So actually, psychological safety has so many more benefits than everything listed, but just food for thought.
It's amazing, Cherie. I mean, there's a ton here that it's clear that psychological safety is a must-have, especially if you want to be a high-performing team or organization. And at this point, I'm sure everybody's wondering, well, how do we get there? Right? That's the biggest thing, right? And so, Emma, what are some of the ways that we can actually create psychological safety?
Yeah, there are actually so many different ways that we can create the right environment for our team members to have psychological safety. And so one of the main ones is to have multiple touch points with your employees so they can have lots of different places where they can voice their thoughts and opinions. For example, anonymous surveys, quarterly conversations, weekly one-on-ones, or even impromptu touch points with your people. You want to make sure, though, in those touch points that you are intentional about asking for thoughts and opinions. Not everyone is naturally wired to openly challenge or push the status quo. It's definitely even harder for people who have come from an environment where that was not an acceptable practice. And so we have to be able to have those spaces for those people who have maybe been burned by speaking their mind in the past. The big thing with it is to make sure that you do something with what is shared when you can. If you can't take information and turn it into action, for example, not everything that comes up on a survey can be addressed. It is still a good idea to acknowledge the feedback and share what is being done with the information that is actionable. And with that, you want to be transparent and open with your people. Each month, our CEO and our CFO share the status of the organization. Sometimes it's all sunshine and rainbows and it's really great. And sometimes it is a tougher conversation and it's all thunderstorms that are happening. But you have to share the information in both the good and the bad times. This shows the vulnerability and it opens up for others to be vulnerable in return. And truly just sharing a thought or an opinion is super vulnerable for some people. So we want to make it as easy as possible for our people. And again, it circles back, it starts with our leadership and setting that tone in that environment. So you really want to ensure that your leaders understand what it takes to create that safe environment. All of this truly starts with trust. You have to build that trust with your employees. If you have everything else set up, it might not matter if you don't have that level of trust with people. So make sure that you're really only asking if you want to know what they want to share. You got to seek to understand their perspective and be open to what they're sharing. And sometimes you might not want to hear it, but don't get defensive in those situations. The whole point is that sometimes there are disagreements or differing of opinions. This is how everyone gets better in these situations. You want to acknowledge that it takes the courage for people to speak up and openly share, and go a step further and thank them for sharing so they know that what they did is being taken and being heard. Another great space to create that sense of belonging to as well is to share in vision conversations. Share on where the organization is going, what the plan is to get there, so people understand what that bigger picture is and how they can be a part of that to get your company there. So I know, Cherie, your team does a really great job at creating an open environment for people. I think one of the main examples that you've talked about before is that keep, start, stop document. Can you share a little bit more on how and why that works for your team?
Yeah, absolutely. And I cannot take credit for creating it. But something that our team has is we go through, we have our surveys. It's called Diagnose. It's actually a little bit of a heat map to see kind of how everyone's feeling, very structured, but we take it one step further. We continue that conversation, and we have something called that keep, start, stop document, where we can brainstorm as part of our weekly meetings, and are called L10s if you're on the EOS system. And we go through and we hit on maybe top 5 parts of our division. What should we keep? What is doing awesome? What should we start? And we really kind of have that open dialogue that members can know in advance. They'll have the time to think it through, but they can raise their hand and say, what if we started this? And we can brainstorm as a team and then stop. As much as we probably want to pretend that there are some things that we don't have to stop, everything's peachy. It is really eye-opening to hear from everyone on the team. This is actually an obstacle. And if there's a trend there, well, let's think creatively. Let's put our minds together and see how we can make things better as well together. So having that open dialogue has just been really helpful in terms of psychological safety, that folks feel like their voice is heard and that we're doing something about it too, if there are any obstacles. So that's been very helpful on our team so far this quarter, and we're going to continue on with that in the future.
That's great. I mean, Emma, Cherie, both of you brought some amazing ideas on how to. I know we've got quite a few questions that are coming in. Before we get there, we'd love to just invite you again to really scan this QR code. You're going to be able to buy 2, get 1 free from L&D. And this is learning and development for those that don't know the Titus acronym. So learning and development team, we put these on. This is going to be an amazing course that you're able to take a look at, both of these, that help you promote psychologically safe cultures. So really consider this training. This is closely tied with psychological safety, feedback being a gift. And as we've heard today, psychological safety means that we can have candid conversations with one another and then provide that honest feedback without those threatening relationships. And so these, the feedback is a gift, these Power Hour team training sessions, this is coming up on March 15th from 10 to 11 Central. And we would definitely recommend sending your entire team to the session so you can all grow together in the art of giving and receiving feedback effectively. So it's $200 a person, buy 2 seats, get 1 free. And we do have another session coming up at the end of the month called The Coaching Difference. That's on March 29th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central. And according to the Human Capital Institute, 51% of organizations with strong coaching cultures report a higher revenue than similar companies. And so that's massive. I mean, obviously there is the component that we talked about before where ethically it's the right thing to do in terms of retention, but it should impact your bottom line as well. And so in this training, we want to train leaders to use coaching skills to empower their employees. So these skills include self-awareness, curious inquiry, open listening, and transformational feedback. This is going to be something that we want to be a gift to you and something that can be transformative. So again, check out the QR codes. There's a lot here. Now we can jump into questions for sure, because I know we've got quite a few that you've sent. So really appreciate people that have been sending the questions through. These are amazing. Cherie, can you think of a time where you've turned a team from lacking that psychological safety, the kind of the days of old that you were talking about, into one that actually did achieve psychological safety?
Yes, I actually have a prime example from a past life. So we had a team where someone was yelling, open dialogue on the floor. You did not do this. This person did. Be like them. I mean, it was crazy. Definitely the definition of lack of psychological safety. We kind of banded together and we thought, okay, let's have some coaching. Let's talk about it. And just having that structure of, we need to make sure that in order to have that psychologically safe environment, that some folks enjoy being praised in the open. Some folks prefer having those one-on-one conversations, especially if it's constructive feedback. So starting to have more one-on-ones versus open floor dialogue and criticism or constructive feedback. And then in addition to more structured one-on-ones, check-ins, and really we had to coach this particular manager, not just to tell individuals what to do, but really open it up and say, how are you feeling? How can I assist? How can I support? So definitely coaching and management boot camp for that individual. And then eventually we did end up getting a new vice president that had a little bit more of a finesse with folks in the workplace.
Sure.
But we were
really
able
good.
to triage.
It's really good. No, that's excellent. There's some really good questions here. I like this one. So Emma, I'll pass this one over to you. How long does it take to improve psychological safety? And how quickly do you feel that you can lose it?
Oh, that is a good question. So I would say it can depend on where your organization is. If you have practices in place to improve your psychological safety, I think a great place to start is by asking for anonymous feedback. Get people comfortable within the space of sharing opinions, sharing feedback anonymously, and then take that and show action from it. This will build trust with your team, and that's how it can quickly enhance your psychological safety. Then start introducing ways, maybe ideate sessions, touch points, open forums for people to share more feedback or opinions publicly. And then they will have that trust there to see in the past precedent has been set that you have done something with it. When open feedback is shared, do the same. Create actionable goals, initiatives from what's shared, and then give constant updates on where that is at. And so how quickly can you lose it? It could be something very minimal, but it's very easy to get back. So if it does happen for your organization, there are definitely strategies that we've shared for you to be able to get it back with your people.
That's great. No, that's really good, Emma. Thank you. I have another one here. This is Shuri. Let's have you answer this one. Have you personally experienced a manager that has done this well? I'm assuming psychological safety, done this well consistently. What are some specific things that they did that we can take away and use?
Yes. Okay. So what have they done well consistently? Definitely. I have a handful of managers that have really poured into the team. I think what has been really helpful is having that cadence, that structure of that open dialogue. I felt, having that platform to really speak up, feel supported is so helpful. Also, something that we use at Titus that I find that's really helpful as well is alignment questions for our quarterly reviews. So some of those questions could be, my manager is invested in my success. I feel valued. I feel part of the team. And having that conversation in addition to checking in on a quarterly basis just fosters that support. That way it's not, I speak with my direct manager once every 2 months or the big annual review. It's that consistent talk points throughout. And if there is something that is an obstacle, you can catch it early and work on it together. So that's been really helpful, I think, full surveys or even alignment questions that we could probably take away and use or continue to use.
That's really good. Something that you said that really stands out is quarterly reviews. I think a lot of organizations fall into the not any reviews unless there's a problem, or maybe an annual sort of review process, which it's fine to have the one official review, maybe if that's the way that you do things, but those quarterly touch points where you actually get to review items that you can change, actually, at least for me, really creates that amount of safety, because we can talk about things before they become big scary issues, right?
Exactly.
There are ways that we can actually pivot and adjust, whether it's behaviors or skills that we need to learn, or even just certain performance metrics. It's not too late by the time you have that conversation, and then it can feel helpless and it can feel a lot less safe to have those types of conversations.
Absolutely. And you're pivoting in real time.
Exactly. That's great. So the next question is really specific to an industry. It says, we are in manufacturing. How can we create this environment in an industry that has minimal interactions with employees? Emma, you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, definitely. I think a good step first to take is to create a suggestion box. If you don't have a lot of interaction with your employees, create a space where they can come on their own time and send in information, whether that be a physical, suggestion box that you have, or we actually have this at Titus, a inbox where you can send an email virtually to as well to share information. Another thing I would suggest too, as well, is if you have minimal interactions with your employees, maybe create a very intentional time and space to increase that interaction with your employees. Maybe it is just a 15 or 30-minute touch point meeting where people can come and just share ideas, connect with one another, but it's specifically that time is set aside to create those interactions, to start building that trust and have it be more face-to-face. The biggest thing I think I've said is you got to be intentional with it, because people will feel the genuine nature of what you're trying to create to make that more open environment.
That's really good, Emma. Those are great suggestions. And I know people are probably looking at the time because it's been about 30 minutes now. And so if people are hopping off, that's great. Again, this is going to be recorded. And so we'll finish up here with the remaining few questions that we have. So catch it on the recording. Again, if you are leaving us, thank you. Again, we want to throw out this invitation for you joining here today. Buy 2, get 1 free from our learning and development team. Feedback is a gift, and the coaching difference are phenomenal. They're impactful, and we would really encourage you and welcome you to join it. So getting to the last couple of questions that we have, Cherie, how do you actually measure psychological safety? I think this is one of those things that can feel nebulous or more subjective to people when it comes to psychological safety. Is there ways that you found that you can actually measure this? And if so, what kind of tools would you recommend using?
Yeah, right. It has such a large span, so it might be kind of hard to hone in. Definitely, like I mentioned before, pulse surveys. Actually, Amy Edmondson does have a psychological safety survey as well, so you could kind of glean from there some of the points. I believe, I don't know if I remember, but it's, I feel like I have an impact in my organization. Some of those questions and those check-ins. Something also that I thought of is you could also use predictive index as a psychological safety tool for engagement and communication one-on-one with your direct employees, or even a team strategy session where you have everyone that maybe they haven't had that opportunity to connect up, have that open dialogue, have that open floor, and really learn about each other. That could be something too, maybe not on the measuring side, but in terms of fostering, and you can kind of maybe even have a post survey after a session like that, and see, wow, are folks responsive? Do they feel more connected and plugged in?
That's really
There's
good.
so many different routes you can go, actually.
There's so many routes you can go. I mean, it is about being intentional, like we've been saying, and being dialed in. And, we've used quite a few different tools as it comes to measuring engagement. And often one of the categories is psychological safety. And truly, any tool that you use should measure manager feedback. And you should, with a level of self-awareness, you should be able to read between the lines of how people are feeling about, are they heard? Are they respected? Do they feel like there's a path in front of them? Do they feel like they've got influence on that path? There's a lot there that we should be able to break down and be able to create that environment that should be more safe for people to have that experience with their manager, especially knowing so much of this comes down to that manager relationship that you have.
Mm-hmm. And before you get to that place of safety of, they're giving me the benefit of the doubt, I feel comfortable, only asking for help, chatting about mistakes. It's also learning about their communication style too, and what makes them tick. So that's really helpful.
That's good. Something you said really resonates too, is it's some of those differences in style. So after you get to know certain people over time, and all of a sudden you see something dramatically different, that's when it starts to feel unsafe, right? When there's not that consistency. And it's hard. We're all human. To be that consistent and maybe upbeat every single meeting is really challenging. And so just that open dialogue and honesty is really important. And it seems to be a good segue into our last question of, Emma, let's have you close us out here. How can someone in a non-leadership role impact psychological safety or encourage their leaders in that area?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I think as someone who is maybe not in a leadership role, they can definitely impact psychological safety. You as an individual can go and seek out others. As everyone has been saying, everyone is different in different environments or how they react in certain spaces. So maybe if you know someone is a little bit more quiet and not wanting to share in a big group, seek them out, connect with them, share, talk with them one-on-one, get with your coworkers, your counterparts, people on other teams, and have a innovation meeting or brainstorming session, just share with one another and encourage it. You can be that champion within your organization. If you're comfortable, you can help others get to that place too. And then be open to sharing that feedback with your leader. Here at Titus, we're committed to getting feedback from everyone within the organization at any level. It goes both ways. It's not just top down. So if you want to encourage your leader, it takes that step, it takes that courage to say it to them, but that's really what's going to open up for everyone else within the organization, is by having those champions that want to help.
Takes a lot of courage to say that to your boss, right? Or to teammates or anything that could appear to be toxic or unsafe. But yeah, just encouraging people to have what we call courageous candor, because feedback truly is a gift. You should always be able to do the age-old complain up to your manager, right? Let's not do the gossip game. Let's not do that. Go right to that manager and talk about those concerns. And it's really their responsibility to adjust to their team and make sure that people are feeling encouraged and cared for. So this is great. I don't see any other questions coming in. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. This was really amazing. Emma and Cherie, always a wealth of knowledge. So thank you both for taking the time to do this. Again, we welcome you to join us for our learning and development sessions that you see here if you scan the QR code. Otherwise, looking forward to seeing you next time for a Titus webinar. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.